They thought she was defenseless. Just another black teenager. They could humiliate, intimidate, silence. They thought wrong. When Officer Ryan Mitchell dumped ice-cold soda over 17-year-old Brianna Hayes' head in the middle of her high school cafeteria, he wasn't just settling a score for his nephew. He was making the biggest mistake of his life. Because Brianna's father, Colonel Marcus Hayes, hadn't spent 23 years commanding the most elite Delta Force unit in U.S. military history to watch his daughter be terrorized on American soil. What followed wasn't revenge. It was precision. A methodical dismantling of corruption by a man trained to eliminate threats, invisible and untraceable. They came for the wrong girl, and they never saw the storm coming until it destroyed them. Before we go deeper into this case, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. The autumn sun broke through Brianna Hayes' bedroom window just after 6 a.m., painting soft gold across the walls. She silenced her alarm, a reflex honed over years of military household discipline, and sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her room told a story. Track medals hanging beside academic certificates, a framed photo of her father in full dress uniform, textbooks stacked neatly on a desk that faced the window. Order, structure, purpose. Her phone screen glowed with a notification, a voice message from her dad. She pressed play, and Colonel Marcus Hayes' gravelly voice filled the small room, warm and steady, as it always was, even across continents. "Morning, baby girl. I know it's early where you are, but it's midnight here, and I couldn't sleep without checking in. Big presentation today, right? The one you've been prepping for all week?" There was a pause, the sound of wind in the background. "Remember what I taught you. Don't let them see you nervous. You walk in there like you own the room, because you do. I'm sorry I can't be there to watch you shine, but this mission, well, you know the deal. Classified. Important. I'll be home soon as I can. I love you, Bree. Make 'em remember your name." Brianna smiled, that bittersweet ache settling in her chest. Her father's deployments had been part of her life since she was old enough to understand what the word classified meant. This one felt different, though. Longer. More secretive. No location disclosed. No timeline given. Just trust and silence. "Love you too, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. She moved through her morning with the efficiency of someone raised by a soldier. Shower, dress, breakfast. She chose a navy blazer and white blouse, professional but not overdone for the presentation. Downstairs, her mother, Dr. Sharon Hayes, was already awake, reviewing patient charts at the kitchen table with her reading glasses perched on her nose. As the head of pediatrics at Riverside Memorial Hospital, Sharon's schedule rivaled her husband's in intensity. "Big day?" Sharon asked, glancing up. Brianna nodded, pouring orange juice. "Dad sent a message. He's okay." Sharon's face softened. "He always is. He'll be home before you know it." She checked her watch. "I've got rounds in an hour. Want a ride?" "No thanks. I need the walk to clear my head." The walk to Lincoln Charter High took 20 minutes through tree-lined streets, where fall leaves crunched underfoot. Brianna used the time to mentally rehearse her presentation on criminal justice reform, a topic she'd chosen deliberately, knowing it would ruffle feathers in their predominantly white, upper-middle-class suburb of Pinewood, Illinois. She'd experienced enough microaggressions here to fuel a thesis. As she approached the school's main entrance, the peaceful morning shattered. Standing near the double doors was Derek Mitchell, tall, blonde, quarterback build, and wearing that infuriating smirk he always had when surrounded by his entourage. They were laughing too loud, voices carrying across the courtyard. Brianna tried to slip past unnoticed. "I'm just saying," Derek's voice boomed. "My uncle basically owns this town. The mayor answers to him. The chief of police? They go fishing together every weekend." He laughed, running fingers through his perfectly styled hair. "Last month, Uncle Ryan pulled over some family from the South Side, and when the dad started talking about rights, Uncle Ryan just smiled and gave him 3 more tickets. Dude couldn't do a thing about it. His friends howled with laughter. Brianna's jaw tightened. Officer Ryan Mitchell's reputation was well known in Pinewood. A cop who operated by his own rules, untouchable because of connections, and a code of silence that protected him. She slipped past without comment. She had better things to focus on. The morning classes crawled by. By lunchtime, Brianna found herself in Mr. Thompson's government classroom for what was supposed to be a student presentation session. Her topic, the need for police accountability in suburban communities. She'd known it would be controversial. She hadn't anticipated how much. Mr. Thompson introduced her with cautious enthusiasm. Brianna has prepared a presentation on criminal justice reform. Let's give her our full attention. Brianna stood, clicked to her first slide, and began. Her voice was steady, authoritative. She cited statistics on racial profiling and traffic stops, referenced cases of qualified immunity protecting officers who'd committed clear violations, and made a compelling argument for civilian oversight boards. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, some impressed, others uncomfortable before scattered applause. Derek raised his hand. Mr. Thompson hesitated, then nodded. So basically, Derek said, leaning back in his chair with exaggerated casualness, you're saying cops are the problem, not the people breaking the law? I'm saying, Brianna replied calmly, that accountability protects everyone. Good officers want it. Bad officers fear it. And communities suffer when there's no way to challenge abuse of power. Abuse of power? Derek laughed. Maybe if certain people showed some respect for authority, they wouldn't have problems with cops in the first place. The classroom went silent. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Brianna took a slow breath. Respect is earned, Derek. And when your uncle brags about writing excessive tickets for families from the South Side just because he can, that's not law enforcement. That's harassment. Derek's face flushed crimson. The smirk vanished. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. I know your uncle's reputation, Brianna said evenly. I know he's been the subject of 12 formal complaints in 5 years. I know none of them led to disciplinary action. I did my research. The room erupted in murmurs. Mr. Thompson tried to restore order, but the damage was done. Derek's humiliation was visible, palpable. His friends stared at him, waiting for a response he couldn't give. That's enough, Mr. Thompson finally said. Brianna, excellent work. Let's move on to the next presentation. But Derek wasn't moving on. As students filed out for lunch, he cornered Brianna in the hallway. You think you're so smart? He hissed, blocking her path. You just made a huge mistake. Move, Derek. My uncle's going to hear about this. And trust me, he doesn't take disrespect lightly. Brianna met his eyes without flinching. Is that a threat? Derek leaned closer, voice dropping. It's a promise. He walked away, leaving Brianna standing alone in the hallway, heart pounding but refusing to show fear. That afternoon, as Brianna walked home, she noticed a Pinewood police cruiser idling at the corner of Maple and 5th, a block she passed every day. The window rolled down. Officer Ryan Mitchell sat behind the wheel, aviator sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. He didn't say anything, just watched her pass. Brianna kept walking, spine straight, refusing to quicken her pace. But she felt his eyes on her the entire way home. The harassment started small. 3 days after Brianna's presentation, she was walking to her car after volleyball practice when she found all 4 tires slashed. No note, no witnesses. Just clean cuts that made it clear this wasn't random vandalism. Campus security reviewed the footage. Conveniently, the camera covering that section of the parking lot had been malfunctioning for the past week. 2 days later, she was pulled over on her way home from the library. Officer Ryan Mitchell stepped out of his cruiser with deliberate slowness, hand resting on his belt as he approached her window. License and registration, he said without preamble. Brianna handed them over, keeping her voice neutral. Can I ask why I was pulled over, officer? Broken taillight. My taillight isn't broken. It is now. He smiled cold, predatory. You can take it up with the judge, or you can accept the warning ticket I'm about to write you, along with some friendly advice. What advice? Mitchell leaned down, face inches from hers. Watch your mouth about things you don't understand, little girl. This town runs on respect. You'd do well to learn that. He wrote the ticket slowly, deliberately wasting her time, before handing it back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Have a good evening, Miss Hayes. Brianna drove home with shaking hands, the ticket crumpled on the passenger seat. When she told her mother what happened, Sharon's face went hard. We're documenting everything, Sharon said. Every interaction, every incident. And we're filing a formal complaint. They did. The complaint disappeared into Pinewood PD's Internal Affairs Department like a stone into deep water. No follow-up, no investigation, just silence. The campaign of intimidation escalated. Anonymous calls to the house at odd hours. A police cruiser parked outside their home for hours at a time, watching small traffic stops for manufactured violations. Brianna began documenting everything: dates, times, badge numbers, photos, when possible. Derek, emboldened by his uncle's protection, made school miserable, whispered insults in hallways, accidentally bumping into her hard enough to knock books from her hands, starting rumors that she was lying about Officer Mitchell, that she had a vendetta against police. Some students believed him. Others stayed silent out of fear. But not everyone. Brianna's best friend, Emma Rodriguez, refused to back down. This is insane, Emma said one afternoon as they sat in Brianna's room, reviewing the documentation. He's literally stalking you, and nobody's doing anything? His brother's on the city council, Brianna said quietly. His fishing buddy is the chief of police. Who exactly do I report him to? Your dad, Emma said immediately. Call your dad. Brianna shook her head. He's on a classified mission somewhere in the Middle East. I can't burden him with this. He's got enough to worry about. Bri, this is literally what dads are for. Especially dads who are trained to... Emma caught herself. You know, trained to what? Come home and beat up a cop? That would end his career and probably land him in jail. No. Brianna's voice was firm. I handle this myself. I document everything. I stay calm. I don't give them a reason to escalate. But staying calm became harder when Officer Mitchell showed up at her school. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the presentation. Brianna was in the cafeteria with Emma and a few other friends when the double doors opened and Officer Ryan Mitchell walked in full uniform. The cafeteria fell silent. Principal Davidson hurried over, looking confused and concerned. Officer Mitchell? Is there a problem? Just doing a safety check, Mitchell said loudly, voice carrying across the room. Making sure our students are behaving themselves. His eyes found Brianna across the cafeteria. He smiled. Then he walked straight toward her table. Every student watched. Conversations died. The only sound was Mitchell's boots on the linoleum floor and the pounding of Brianna's heart. He stopped at her table, looming over her. Miss Hayes, he said pleasantly, funny running into you here. This is my school, Brianna said quietly. Why wouldn't I be here? Just making sure you're staying out of trouble. You have been making some interesting accusations lately, spreading rumors about law enforcement. I've been documenting facts. Facts? Mitchell's smile widened. See? That's where we disagree. You've been spreading lies, defaming a public servant. That could be considered slander, you know. Principal Davidson intervened, voice uncertain. Officer Mitchell, if there's a specific issue... No issue, Mitchell interrupted, still staring at Brianna. Just wanted to check in on our concerned citizen here. Make sure she understands that actions have consequences. He reached for the soda can on Brianna's table, a Diet Coke she'd been drinking, and picked it up. You should be more careful, he said softly. Spills happen. And then he poured it. Slowly, deliberately, over Brianna's head. The cold liquid soaked through her hair, her clothes, dripping onto the cafeteria floor as 300 students watched in stunned silence. Brianna sat frozen, hands clenched in her lap, refusing to cry, refusing to react, refusing to give him the satisfaction. Mitchell set the empty can down. "Oops," he said. "My mistake." He turned and walked out of the cafeteria. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Emma was there, helping Brianna to her feet, fury blazing in her eyes. "I'm calling the police." "He is the police," Brianna said quietly, voice shaking but controlled. "Who am I supposed to call?" Principal Davidson approached, face pale. "Brianna, that was completely unacceptable. I'll be filing a report." "To who?" Brianna's voice cracked. "To his department? To his chief? Who's his best friend? To the city council, where his brother works." She wiped soda from her face with trembling hands. "There's no one to report him to, Mr. Davidson. That's the whole point. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one." She walked to the bathroom alone, Emma following at a distance. In the harsh fluorescent light, Brianna stared at her reflection, hair dripping, mascara running, white blouse ruined, and felt something crack inside her. Not her spirit, not her resolve, but the last remnants of faith that the system would protect her. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and did what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She called her father. The call went to voicemail. Of course it did. He was on a mission, communications limited or non-existent. "Dad," Brianna said, voice breaking, "I need you to call me when you can. It's important. I'm okay. I'm safe, but I need you. Please call me." She hung up and stared at her reflection. Then she did something she hadn't planned to do. She opened her phone's camera and recorded everything. The ruined clothes, the tears she could no longer hold back, and a clear, steady account of what had just happened. When she was done, she sent the video to Emma with a single instruction: "If anything happens to me, make sure this gets out." Emma's response came immediately. "Nothing's going to happen to you, but I'm keeping this safe." Brianna went home sick that day. Her mother took one look at her and immediately called a lawyer, a civil rights attorney named Patricia Okonkwo, who'd made a career of taking on police misconduct cases. "What Officer Mitchell did today was assault," Patricia said over speakerphone that evening, "in front of hundreds of witnesses. We can file charges, pursue a civil suit." "And then what?" Sharon interrupted, voice tight with controlled fury. "He gets a slap on the wrist, paid administrative leave, his department protects him, and my daughter becomes an even bigger target?" "Mrs. Hayes, I understand your frustration." "Do you?" Sharon's voice cracked. "Do you understand what it's like to watch your child be terrorized and know that the people who are supposed to protect her are the ones hurting her?" There was a pause. Then Patricia's voice came back, gentler. "I do, actually. That's why I do this work. And that's why I'm telling you we fight this. Not just for Brianna, but for every kid who comes after her. We make it so expensive, so public, so damaging to Mitchell and his department that they think twice before doing this to someone else." Brianna, listening from the couch wrapped in a blanket, finally spoke. "What are the chances we win?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, in a town like Pinewood, with a police department this insular, maybe 30%. But those odds improve dramatically if we can get federal attention. Civil rights violations, pattern of misconduct, conspiracy to deprive constitutional rights. If we can build that case, the FBI gets involved. Then it's a different game." "How do we build that case?" Sharon asked. "We document everything. We find other victims. We create a paper trail so extensive that it can't be ignored. And we pray that someone with power gives a damn." After the call ended, Brianna sat in silence with her mother. The house felt too quiet, too empty without her father's presence. "We should wait until Dad gets home," Brianna said finally. "He'll know what to do." Sharon pulled her daughter close. "We're not waiting for anyone, baby. We start fighting back tomorrow." But Officer Ryan Mitchell wasn't done. 3 days after the cafeteria incident, he came for Brianna again, this time at home. It was just after 7 p.m. Sharon was at the hospital for a double shift, and Brianna was alone, working on homework in the living room, when headlights flooded through the front windows. A police cruiser pulled into their driveway. Brianna's stomach dropped. Officer Mitchell emerged slowly, deliberately, taking his time walking to the front door. When he knocked, it was loud enough to echo through the house. Brianna stood frozen for a moment, phone in hand. She opened the camera app and hit record before answering the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Miss Hayes," Mitchell said through the crack, that same cold smile on his face. "We need to talk." "About what?" "I've received reports of suspicious activity at this residence. I'm going to need to come inside and conduct a safety check." "Do you have a warrant?" Mitchell's smile widened. "I don't need a warrant for a safety check. Now open the door. I'm a minor, alone in the house, and you're asking to come inside without a warrant or my mother present?" "No, Officer Mitchell. You can wait outside while I call my mother and our attorney." His face darkened. "You're being uncooperative. That gives me probable cause to believe there's something illegal happening inside. Then you're welcome to get a warrant and come back with it. Until then, you're trespassing on private property." For a moment, Mitchell said nothing. Then, he leaned close to the door crack, voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think having a lawyer and a fancy daddy in the military makes you untouchable?" His eyes were cold. "Let me tell you something, little girl. I own this town. Your complaints? Buried. Your attorney? She can file all the lawsuits she wants. They'll go nowhere. And your daddy? He's halfway around the world playing soldier, while I'm right here, right now, making your life hell." He straightened up, adjusting his belt. "This is your last warning. Drop the complaints. Stop running your mouth. And maybe I'll let you live your life in peace. Keep pushing, and I promise you'll regret it." Brianna's hand trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "Get off our property." "Officer Mitchell." "Now." He stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. "See you around, Miss Hayes." He walked back to his cruiser with deliberate slowness, got in, and sat there, watching the house, not leaving. Brianna locked every door, closed every curtain, and called her mother. "I'm coming home," Sharon said immediately. "Stay on the line with me." "Mom, you can't leave your shift." "Watch me." Sharon arrived 40 minutes later to find Mitchell's cruiser still parked in their driveway. She marched straight to his window and knocked sharply. Mitchell rolled it down. "All false courtesy. Evening, Dr. Hayes. Just conducting a neighborhood watch." "In my driveway? For an hour?" "Public street, ma'am. I can park wherever I want." "You threatened my daughter. I have it on video." Mitchell's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you're talking about. I came to conduct a safety check and your daughter refused to cooperate. That's all in my report. Get off our property." "Or what? You'll call the police?" He laughed. "I am the police, Dr. Hayes. And unless you want your medical license scrutinized for some interesting discrepancies, I'd suggest you teach your daughter some manners." He drove away slowly, leaving Sharon standing in the driveway, shaking with rage. Inside, Brianna showed her mother the video. "This is beyond harassment," Sharon said, voice hollow. "This is stalking, intimidation, witness tampering." "And who do we report it to?" Brianna asked quietly. They both knew the answer. No one. If you were in Brianna's situation, facing someone who's supposed to protect you, but who's using their power to hurt you instead, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. The next morning, Brianna woke to find her story had gone viral. Not by her choice. Emma had posted the cafeteria video, the one Brianna had sent for safekeeping on social media, with the caption, "This is Officer Ryan Mitchell of Pinewood PD assaulting a 17-year-old girl for speaking truth to power. Share this." Within hours, it had 50,000 views. By noon, 200,000. By evening, national news outlets were calling, and Officer Ryan Mitchell's world began to crumble. The Pinewood Police Department released a statement calling the video a misunderstanding taken out of context and placed Mitchell on paid administrative leave pending an internal investigation. But the internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. Activists started digging into Mitchell's history. The 12 complaints Brianna had mentioned, now public. Stories from other victims started emerging: traffic stops that turned violent, false arrests, planted evidence, a pattern of targeting Black and Latino residents that stretched back years. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation. The Illinois Attorney General announced a review of the Pinewood Police Department's practices. And Ryan Mitchell, who'd spent 15 years operating with impunity, suddenly found himself very, very exposed. But he wasn't going down alone. 2 weeks after the video went viral, Brianna received a phone call that changed everything. "Miss Hayes, this is Colonel James Patterson from U.S. Special Operations Command. I'm calling about your father." Brianna's blood went cold. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, but he's been briefed on your situation, and he's concerned. He asked me to relay a message. Stay safe, stay smart, and don't do anything until he gets home, which should be in approximately 72 hours. He's coming home? His mission concluded ahead of schedule. He'll be debriefed and on a transport within the day." There was a pause. "Miss Hayes, I've known your father for 15 years. I've never seen him this angry. Whatever's happening in Pinewood, I'd suggest Officer Mitchell start running. Because when Marcus Hayes comes for you, there's nowhere to hide." The call ended, leaving Brianna staring at her phone in shock. Her father was coming home, and Ryan Mitchell had no idea what was about to hit him. Colonel Marcus Hayes arrived home on a Thursday evening, 60 hours after receiving word about Brianna's situation. He came in quietly, no fanfare, no announcement, just walked through the front door in civilian clothes, duffel bag over his shoulder, eyes that had seen too much darkness. Brianna ran to him, and for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Marcus held his daughter for a long moment, then pulled back to look at her, hands on her shoulders. "Tell me everything," he said quietly, "and don't leave anything out." They sat at the kitchen table, Marcus, Sharon, and Brianna, as Brianna walked through every incident, every threat, every moment of terror. She showed him the videos, the documentation, the complaint that had gone nowhere. Marcus didn't interrupt. He listened with the focused intensity of a man trained to assess threats and eliminate them. When Brianna finished, he was quiet for a long time. "How much trouble is Mitchell in right now?" he finally asked. Sharon pulled up news articles on her tablet. FBI investigation, State Attorney General review, national media attention. He's on administrative leave. But his union is defending him. The department is circling wagons. And his lawyer is already talking about Brianna being a troubled teenager with a vendetta. Marcus's jaw tightened. And the chief of police, his fishing buddy, has made no public statement condemning Mitchell's actions. The mayor issued a generic statement about supporting law enforcement while taking all allegations seriously. In other words, nothing. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he looked at Brianna, and she saw something in his eyes that was both terrifying and reassuring. "I spent 23 years in Delta Force," he said quietly. "You know what we do? We identify threats to national security, and we eliminate them. Quickly, efficiently, completely." He leaned forward. "Ryan Mitchell terrorized my daughter, made her afraid in her own home, used his badge to threaten and intimidate a child. That makes him a threat, and I know how to handle threats. Marcus," Sharon said carefully, "we have to do this legally." "I am doing this legally," Marcus interrupted, "but I'm also doing it my way." He stood up. "Mitchell thinks he's untouchable because he controls local power. He doesn't understand that there are levels of power he's never even imagined. By the time I'm done, he won't just lose his badge. He'll lose everything. Dad, Brianna said quietly. "What are you going to do?" Marcus smiled, not warmly, but with grim purpose. "I'm going to teach Officer Mitchell what it feels like to be hunted." Marcus Hayes didn't waste time. The next morning, he made a single phone call to an old friend, Brigadier General Catherine Reynolds, who now worked in the Pentagon's office of the Inspector General. "Catherine, it's Marcus. I need a favor." "Name it." "There's a police officer in Pinewood, Illinois, named Ryan Mitchell. He assaulted my daughter. I need everything: service record, personnel file, internal affairs, complaints, use of force reports, everything the FBI's civil rights investigation has uncovered, and I need it yesterday." There was a pause. "Marcus, you know I can't just—" "My 17-year-old daughter was terrorized by a cop who thought his badge made him untouchable. He stalked her, threatened her, humiliated her in front of her entire school. He came to our home and tried to intimidate her while she was alone. So, yes, Catherine, you can, and you will. Because if the system won't protect children from predators with badges, then I will." Another pause. Then, "Give me 2 hours." Marcus spent those 2 hours making more calls. To the Illinois State Police, to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, to an investigative journalist at the Chicago Tribune who specialized in police corruption, to the ACLU, to every organization and individual who could bring pressure to bear on Pinewood PD. By noon, he had a complete picture of Ryan Mitchell's career, and it was worse than he'd imagined. 23 internal affairs complaints over 15 years. 8 settled lawsuits, all sealed with NDAs and paid from the city's insurance fund. Multiple allegations of excessive force, racial profiling, falsifying reports, and witness intimidation. A pattern of targeting young Black and Latino residents, particularly women, with what could only be described as systematic harassment. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, reading through the files, his expression growing darker with each page. "How does someone like this keep their badge?" Brianna asked, reading over his shoulder. "Because nobody with power cared enough to stop him," Marcus said quietly. "Until now." He made another call, this one to Patricia Okonkwo, the civil rights attorney. "Patricia, it's Colonel Hayes, Brianna's father. I need you to file a federal lawsuit, not just against Mitchell, against the entire Pinewood Police Department, the chief, the city, everyone who enabled this pattern of abuse. I want this so big, so public, so expensive that they have no choice but to clean house. Colonel Hayes, I appreciate the sentiment, but federal civil rights lawsuits are extremely difficult to win." "We're not trying to win," Marcus interrupted. "We're trying to burn the system down and rebuild it. Discovery alone will expose everything. And I guarantee you, Pinewood PD has skeletons they don't want uncovered. So, we file, we make noise, and we force them to negotiate from a position of total weakness." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "You've thought this through. I've spent 2 decades running operations against enemies who thought they were untouchable. This is what I do." Marcus's voice was ice. "By the time we're done, Ryan Mitchell will be in federal prison, and Pinewood PD will be under a consent decree that fundamentally changes how they operate. That's not a hope. That's a promise." Patricia's voice came back with renewed energy. "Then let's get to work." While Marcus orchestrated the legal assault, Brianna returned to school. It was her choice. Marcus wanted her to take time off, but she refused. "Mitchell wanted me to be afraid," she told her father. "He wanted me to hide. I'm done hiding." The atmosphere at Lincoln Charter High had changed. Students who'd stayed silent before now approached Brianna with apologies, support, stories of their own encounters with Mitchell or his friends in the department. The principal called an assembly to address recent events and made it clear that intimidation and harassment wouldn't be tolerated. Derek Mitchell was notably absent. His family had pulled him from school, citing safety concerns after he'd received death threats online. Emma walked with Brianna between classes, a protective presence. "You're basically a hero now," Emma said. "You know that, right?" I don't feel like a hero, Brianna replied quietly. I feel angry and tired. You can be both. Emma squeezed her shoulder. What you did standing up to him, documenting everything, refusing to back down, that took courage most adults don't have. You changed things, Bree. Maybe. But the cost had been high, and the battle was far from over. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in the story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Ryan Mitchell, meanwhile, was discovering what it felt like to be powerless. His paid leave became unpaid suspension when the FBI's preliminary report found credible evidence of civil rights violations. His union, initially supportive, grew distant as more victims came forward and the media scrutiny intensified. His friends in the department stopped returning calls. His brother on the city council publicly distanced himself, issuing a statement about the importance of accountability. His fishing buddy, the chief of police, suddenly retired for personal reasons, leaving Mitchell without his most powerful protector. And then the federal lawsuit hit. Patricia Okonkwo filed a comprehensive civil rights complaint naming Mitchell, the Pinewood Police Department, the former chief, and the city as defendants. The allegations were devastating. Systematic harassment, racial profiling, conspiracy to violate constitutional rights, failure to supervise, and municipal liability for maintaining policies that enabled abuse. The requested damages, $20 million. The same day the lawsuit was filed, Marcus held a press conference on the steps of the Pinewood courthouse. He stood in his military dress uniform, medals gleaming in the afternoon sun, Brianna and Sharon beside him. News cameras from local and national outlets surrounded them. My name is Colonel Marcus Hayes, he began, voice carrying with military precision. For 23 years, I've served this country in the United States Army's most elite Special Operations Unit. I've faced terrorists, war criminals, and enemies of democracy around the world, and I always believed that when I came home, my family would be safe, that the rule of law would protect them. He paused, jaw tight. I was wrong. My 17-year-old daughter was terrorized by a police officer who believed his badge made him untouchable. Officer Ryan Mitchell stalked her, threatened her, assaulted her in front of hundreds of witnesses, and used the power of his position to try to silence her. And the system designed to hold him accountable failed. Completely. The cameras clicked and whirred. But here's what Officer Mitchell, and anyone like him, needs to understand. You don't get to terrorize children and hide behind a badge. You don't get to abuse your authority and expect the shadows to protect you. Because I spent 2 decades operating in those shadows, and I know how to drag you into the light. His voice hardened. This lawsuit isn't about money. It's about accountability. It's about making sure no other child in Pinewood or anywhere else has to endure what my daughter endured. And it's about sending a message. If you're a cop who thinks the rules don't apply to you, if you think your connections and your union and your code of silence will save you, think again. Because we will find you. We will expose you. And we will hold you accountable. He looked directly into the cameras. To every victim of police misconduct who's watching this, you are not alone. You are not powerless. And you deserve justice. Contact our attorney, Patricia Okonkwo. Tell your story, because together we can change this system. Brianna stepped forward, her own voice steady despite the cameras. I was scared every single day. I thought about staying quiet, about just accepting it because fighting seemed impossible. But I learned something. Silence protects abusers. Speaking up protects victims. And if my story can help even one person find the courage to speak their truth, then everything I went through was worth it. The press conference went viral within hours. The hashtag number Justice for Brianna trended nationally. Congressional representatives called for federal oversight of local police departments. Civil rights organizations rallied support. And in Pinewood, the walls began to close in on Ryan Mitchell. 2 weeks later, federal agents arrived at Mitchell's home at 6 a.m. with an arrest warrant. Charges: deprivation of rights under color of law, making false statements, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering, all federal crimes carrying significant prison time. Mitchell's attorney held a press conference declaring his client's innocence and calling the charges politically motivated. But the evidence was overwhelming. Videos, witness statements, documented threats, a pattern of misconduct stretching back years. The trial date was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, the Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into the Pinewood Police Department under the consent decree process, the same type of federal oversight that had been imposed on police departments in Ferguson, Baltimore, and Chicago. The mayor, facing a recall petition, announced sweeping reforms, mandatory body cameras, civilian oversight board, retraining on constitutional policing, and a complete audit of past complaints. It wasn't enough to satisfy everyone, but it was a start. Marcus Hayes, however, wasn't satisfied with institutional reform. He wanted to understand how the system had failed so completely, how a predator like Mitchell had operated for 15 years without consequences, who had protected him, and why. So he did what he did best. He investigated. Using his military contacts and his own expertise in intelligence gathering, Marcus began tracing the network of corruption that had shielded Mitchell. What he found was more extensive than he'd imagined. Mitchell wasn't just one bad cop. He was part of a larger pattern. 8 officers in the Pinewood PD had similar complaint histories. They operated as an informal network, covering for each other's misconduct, intimidating witnesses who tried to report them, and using their collective influence to bury investigations. They had support from a city councilman, Mitchell's brother, who controlled the police budget and blocked reform efforts. They had protection from the former police chief, who'd personally dismissed dozens of valid complaints. And they had the tacit approval of a mayor, who prioritized law and order rhetoric over accountability. Marcus compiled everything into a detailed report and delivered it personally to the FBI's field office in Chicago. Then he sent copies to the Department of Justice, the Illinois Attorney General, and every major news outlet in the state. The headlines the next day were devastating. Federal investigation expands. Pinewood PD accused of systemic corruption. 8 officers under investigation for civil rights violations. Former police chief faces federal charges for obstruction. The dominoes began to fall. 3 officers resigned before they could be fired. 2 more were placed on unpaid suspension, pending criminal investigation. The city councilman, Mitchell's brother, announced he wouldn't seek re-election and quietly moved out of state. The mayor, facing a recall election he would certainly lose, resigned. And Ryan Mitchell, sitting in his attorney's office watching his world collapse, made a desperate decision. He decided to cooperate. Mitchell's cooperation deal was simple. Testify against the other officers involved in the corruption network, provide evidence of the chief's obstruction, and admit to his crimes against Brianna and other victims. In exchange, federal prosecutors would recommend a reduced sentence. Patricia Okonkwo was furious when she heard about the deal. 5 to 7 years, she said to Marcus over the phone. He terrorized your daughter, abused his authority for over a decade, and he gets 5 to 7 years? It's not about Mitchell anymore, Marcus replied calmly. It's about dismantling the entire system that enabled him. His testimony will put the former chief in prison, expose the other officers, and provide the evidence needed for the consent decree. That's worth more than a longer sentence for one man. And how does Brianna feel about that? Marcus was quiet for a moment. She's angry. And she has every right to be. But she also understands what we're trying to accomplish here. In fact, Brianna had surprised everyone with her response. I don't need him to rot in prison for 50 years, she'd said when they discussed the plea deal. I need him to never be able to do this to anyone else. And if his cooperation gets us that, then it's worth it. The maturity of that statement from a 17-year-old who'd been terrorized and traumatized left Marcus both proud and heartbroken. The trial that followed wasn't Mitchell's. He'd pled guilty. It was the federal government's case against the former chief of police, Jonathan Reeves, and 2 other officers, accused of conspiracy to violate civil rights. Brianna testified. So did 6 other victims Mitchell had targeted over the years, young Black and Latino residents who'd been pulled over for fabricated violations, harassed, threatened, and in 2 cases, physically assaulted. Their stories painted a picture of systematic abuse enabled by deliberate indifference from leadership. Former Chief Reeves took the stand in his own defense and made matters worse. He was arrogant, dismissive, insistent that his officers had done nothing wrong and that the victims were lying for financial gain. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Reeves was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The 2 other officers received 8 and 10 years, respectively. Ryan Mitchell, true to his deal, received 7 years. He would be eligible for parole in 5. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was accountability. Real, tangible, undeniable accountability in a system that had offered none before. 6 months after Mitchell's sentencing, Brianna sat in her bedroom looking at college acceptance letters. Georgetown, Howard, Northwestern, Yale, all had accepted her. Some had even referenced her activism in their acceptance letters, calling her an exemplary demonstration of civic courage. Her father knocked on the open door. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the letters spread across her desk. "Impressive collection. You've earned every one of them." Brianna smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I keep thinking about what it costs, though. The fear, the nightmares I still have, the way I flinch when I see a police car." She looked at her father. "Was it worth it?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I can't answer that for you, baby girl. Only you can decide if the cost was worth the outcome. But I can tell you this. You changed lives. Not just your own, but every person who'll benefit from the reforms in Pinewood. Every kid who won't be terrorized by cops who think they're above the law. Every victim who saw your courage and found their own." He picked up one of the acceptance letters, Georgetown's pre-law program. "Is this what you want to do? Become a lawyer?" "I think so," Brianna said quietly. "I want to understand how the system works, how it's supposed to work, and I want to fix it for people who can't fight the way we did. People who don't have a Delta Force commander for a father, or the resources to hire a civil rights attorney." Marcus smiled, pride evident in his expression. "Then you'll be an incredible attorney, because you already understand what most lawyers never learn. The law is meaningless if people are too afraid to use it, and courage is contagious." He stood up, heading for the door, then paused. "Bree, I'm sorry I wasn't here when it started, that you had to face that alone." "You came when I needed you most," Brianna replied, "and you taught me something important before you even knew what was happening." "What's that?" "That fear is just information, and what matters is what you do with it." Marcus nodded, throat tight. "Where'd you learn that?" Brianna smiled. "From you, Dad, from watching you all these years." The final piece of Brianna's journey came 3 months later, at the Pinewood Town Hall meeting where the new police chief was being introduced. Chief Maria Santos was everything the town needed. Experienced, reform-minded, committed to community policing and accountability. She'd been brought in specifically to implement the federal consent decree and rebuild trust with residents. In her opening speech, she did something unexpected. "I want to acknowledge someone who should be here today," Chief Santos said, gesturing to the front row where Brianna sat with her parents. Brianna Hayes, a 17-year-old girl who demonstrated more courage than many adults in this room when she stood up to corruption and abuse of power. "Because of her bravery, we have the opportunity to build something better here in Pinewood." The audience applauded. Some stood. "We're implementing what we're calling the Hayes Protocol," Santos continued. "Named after Brianna, it's a comprehensive system for receiving, investigating, and acting on complaints against officers. Full transparency, civilian oversight, and a presumption that victims deserve to be heard and believed unless evidence proves otherwise. No more burying complaints. No more protecting bad cops. Accountability. Always. After the meeting, Santos approached Brianna personally. "I mean what I said. You changed this department, and I want to make sure that change is permanent." Brianna shook her hand. And for the first time since the cafeteria incident, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the belief that everything would be perfect going forward, but the hard-won hope that comes from fighting through darkness and emerging into light. The knowledge that systems can change, that accountability is possible, that one voice speaking truth can echo far beyond what anyone imagines. What's your take on how Brianna handled this entire situation? Do you think you would have had the strength to fight back the way she did? Let me know in the comments. 5 years later, Brianna Hayes returned to Pinewood for the first time since leaving for college. She was 22 now, finishing her final year at Georgetown Law, and she'd been invited to speak at Lincoln Charter High's Career Day. Walking through those familiar hallways brought back memories, some painful, most empowering. The school had changed. Hallways displayed posters about student rights, bystander intervention, and resources for reporting abuse. The culture had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Brianna's presentation was in the auditorium. She'd expected maybe 30 students. Instead, the room was packed over 200 students, plus teachers, and even some community members who'd heard she was coming. She stood at the podium, looking out at faces that reminded her of who she'd been. Young, uncertain, navigating a world that didn't always feel safe. "I stood in this school 5 years ago," Brianna began, "and I was terrified, not of tests or college applications or normal teenage things. I was terrified of a police officer who'd decided I was a threat because I'd spoken truth about injustice." The room was silent. "That officer humiliated me in your cafeteria. He stalked me, threatened me, tried to break me, and for a while, I thought he would succeed. Because how do you fight someone with a badge? How do you challenge a system designed to protect itself?" She paused, letting the question hang. "I learned something important. You fight by refusing to stay silent, by documenting everything, by finding allies who believe in justice more than convenience, and by understanding that change doesn't come from one person having all the courage. It comes from lots of people finding a little bit of courage and using it together." A girl in the third row raised her hand tentatively. "But what if speaking up makes it worse? What if you don't have a famous father or resources to fight back?" Brianna smiled gently. "I didn't fight alone. Nobody does. The resources I had access to, attorneys, media attention, my father's connections, those helped. But the most important resource was the decision to speak truth, regardless of consequences. Everything else built from that." After the presentation, students lined up to talk to her. Some shared their own stories of injustice. Others asked for advice. A few just wanted to shake her hand and say thank you for showing them that resistance was possible. One student, a young black boy who couldn't have been more than 15, waited until everyone else had left. "My brother was arrested last month," he said quietly. "The cops said he matched a description, but he was just walking home from basketball practice. They roughed him up pretty bad. He's scared to file a complaint because he thinks it'll make things worse." Brianna's heart ached. "What's your name?" "Marcus." She smiled at the coincidence, the same name as her father. "Marcus, does your brother want to fight this?" "I think so, but he doesn't know how." Brianna pulled out a business card. Patricia Okonkwo's firm, where she now worked as a law clerk. "Have him call this number. Tell them Brianna Hayes sent you. They'll help him, and they won't charge him a cent." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me with his story," Brianna replied. "And Marcus, tell your brother he's not alone. Tell him that fighting back is scary, but it's not hopeless. And tell him that every person who stands up makes it easier for the next person to do the same." That evening, Brianna had dinner with her parents at their home in Pinewood. Marcus was between deployments, and Sharon had taken the night off from the hospital. They sat around the same kitchen table where they'd planned their legal strategy 5 years ago. But the mood was different now. Lighter, hopeful. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said, raising his glass of wine. "Not just for what you did back then, but for what you're doing now. Turning your pain into purpose. That's the hardest kind of strength." "I learned from the best," Brianna replied, clinking her glass against his. Sharon smiled. "So Georgetown Law finishes in May. Then what?" "Then I take the bar exam, and I start full-time at Patricia's firm. We're working on a case right now, class action against a police department in Ohio with a pattern of racial profiling. It's going to be a fight, but you're good at those," Marcus finished. Brianna laughed. "Yeah, I guess I am." Later that night, she drove past her old high school. The marquee out front read, "Career Day Speaker, Brianna Hayes, standing up for justice." She thought about the terrified 17-year-old who'd walk these halls, afraid to speak, afraid to fight, afraid that standing up would only make things worse. That girl had been brave, but she'd also been alone in a way that no teenager should ever be. The woman Brianna had become understood something her younger self couldn't have known. You're never fighting alone. Every person who came before you, who stood up and spoke out and refused to stay silent, carved a path you can follow. And every time you stand up, you make that path wider for the person coming after you. 3 years later, Brianna Hayes stood in the auditorium of the Illinois State Bar Association, being honored as Young Attorney of the Year for her work on police accountability cases. She'd won 12 civil rights cases in her first 3 years of practice, secured consent decrees for 2 police departments, helped pass state legislation requiring body cameras and civilian oversight boards, and mentored dozens of young victims finding the courage to challenge abuse of power. The award citation read, "For exceptional dedication to civil rights advocacy and transformative impact on police accountability in Illinois." As she accepted the award, Brianna thought about everyone who'd helped her reach this moment. Emma, who'd posted that video when silence would have been safer. Patricia, who'd fought for her when winning seemed impossible. Her mother, who'd never stopped believing in justice even when the system failed them. Her father, who'd taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else mattered more. And all the victims who'd come forward after her, adding their voices to a chorus that couldn't be ignored. "This award isn't just for me," Brianna said in her acceptance speech. "It's for every person who's ever stood up to abuse of power, every victim who refused to stay silent, every witness who chose truth over convenience, every advocate who fights battles they'll never personally benefit from because it's the right thing to do." She paused, looking out at the audience of attorneys, judges, and advocates. 8 years ago, I was a terrified 17-year-old being terrorized by a cop who thought his badge made him untouchable. Today, I'm an attorney who specializes in proving that nobody is above accountability. The applause was thunderous. The system that failed me back then is changing. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. And it's changing because people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Because survivors become advocates. Because fear transforms into resistance. Because silence gives way to voices raised in truth. She held up the award. "This is for everyone who believed that one voice could matter. You were right. It can. And when those voices join together, they can change the world." Brianna's story reminds us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear. It's about speaking truth when silence would be easier. It's about fighting for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that one person can make a difference, if it gave you hope that justice is possible, even when systems fail, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below sharing what resonated most with you. What would you do in Brianna's situation? Have you ever had to stand up against someone more powerful? Your story matters, and this community is here to listen. And if you believe these stories of resilience and justice deserve to be heard, Hit that subscribe button and join the Justice Stories family. Like this video to help it reach others who need to hear it. Share it with someone who needs to know that they're not alone in their fight. Because every time you engage, every time you share, every time you speak up, you're making the path a little wider for the next person who needs the courage to walk it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing that justice, however hard fought, is always worth pursuing. I'll see you in the next story.